And as we look at changing her body from fueling on glucose to fueling on fat, it's inside her mitochondria that we were able to gain power. So if you look at the fuel options here, this is one of my little cartoons of a mitochondria. And that electrical image in the middle is really looking at how much electricity, how much fuel was coming out of a mitochondria. So carbs enter into that mitochondria as glucose. And as that glucose continues along the mitochondria, it is processed, and the electron chain transport uses that to give energy. But the energy is really just like a little quick up and down. It really is not sustained energy. When fat enters the mitochondria, it is burned as a ketone, and my, oh my, the difference in the energy that comes out of those mitochondria is not just a little bit, it is longer, it is stronger, but it requires fuel. As soon as you burn through those mitochondria that you've made, it'll go back to using the glucose that's hanging out. When she would have the carbs running through her mitochondria, and you can kind of see that really faint, tiny mitochondria back in the back of that slide. That's what I'm trying to get you to see, is that the energy you get from carbohydrates really was only lasting her a couple of hours. And that's why she was needing to eat every 6 to 8 hours. As you looked at the other options for fat, once she has enough fat around, she could have the fat supplied, the fat built ketones to fuel her for such a long time, so much more energy. You do not get to wake up tomorrow and say, I'm keto because of the way I eat. You really have to reset chemistry inside that body to live off of fat. She stepped into the ketogenic diet. She was eating every 2 to 3 hours. We put her on less than 20 carbs a day. She really needed sweeteners to help her. She failed within the first couple of weeks. And then we said, all right, let me introduce you to Ketones-In-A-Can. And that's that white line below that you can see. But this is, again, ketones made in a can. And when she had so much insulin throughout her body, it was just too easy for her body to burn through what few ketones she made and then go back to burning glucose. So as Sheila had improved her supply of ketones by taking Ketones-In-A-Can, she really changed the chemistry. She started out with just a trickle of ketones, and because of what her insulin was doing in the background, it was really a chemical nightmare. Only after we started supplying her body with ketones was she able to convert more and more and more of her system to using ketones, and then the flood of her liver started to make the ketones. The liver in her body will do a far better job than any supplement out there. But getting her past that first step of, yes, you can make ketones enough to sustain your energy. And as the background chemistry was changing inside Sheila, her addiction to eating so often was difficult. She couldn't let go of eating 4 or 5 times a day still. So we got her down to 3 meals a day, and she could sustain. She says, I'm really not hungry in between. The truth is, I'm just so used to eating that often. So finally we got her to 2 meals a day, and that was in recent weeks. And just this past week, she said, I finally understand what you mean, that when your body has enough fat-based hormones. And again, the fat-based hormones will rise at approximate levels that your ketones will rise. That supply of ketones in Sheila is now a steady supply. She can depend on them. Her liver is very efficient at making them. And again, she's fallen off this wagon probably 5 or 6 times in the 2 years we've been helping her. But recently, she really stepped on. She has found her energy. And she goes, you know, it got time for my second meal in the day, and I could feel that I wasn't hungry. I sipped on some salt. She's got those salt sucking. I think everybody in my keto group has been converted to how powerful that is. So she grabbed some salt. She sucked on the salt and really said, I could not believe, for the first time in maybe her whole life, she was able to say, this isn't hunger. I really am not hungry. And it was such a breakthrough for her. So at first, her fear of fat wasn't so much that she had struggles eating it. It was she was so patterned to eating her fat-based or her meals so often that the addiction of chewing, of feeling sweetness, of comforting herself, and then that habit of just going to the fridge and opening the door when she was having emotions seemed to be the steering wheel for her whole metabolism. When we focus on Betsy, Betsy had actually been using some MCT oil, and again, that does give her a longer fuel. But this past week, let's go to the next slide. So she had used some of the C8, C10, and I said, you're not going to want a couple of these. You're really going to want to supply the body with quite a few grams of fat, especially at the beginning. And I said, you know, in the studies where we converted someone's brain in 4 days or less, we put people who are struggling with cognitive problems on 30 grams a day. Now, the biggest reason they failed that study is they got diarrhea. That is a lot of fat to swallow in somebody whose body isn't used to absorbing fat. And she really was like, I don't take nearly that much. I feel fine. I don't even feel hungry. And I'm like, I know, but your hormones for fat have been low. And so we talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago. And she says, well, I think I can go at least one meal a day. And I said, don't do that. Don't do that. What's your cholesterol? Oh, I have really low cholesterol. And she goes, I'm going into the doctor and they're going to do some hormone tests. Now, in my clinic, I don't do these. I have done these, but I have learned there is, first of all, they're super expensive. Many times they're not covered by the insurance. But most importantly, the amount of fat that is in circulation is often just a tiny little glimpse of what I want to know. With each of these hormones, there is a fluctuation that is normal. They go up and down, responding to what your body's asking for. And there are so many ways you can screw up this really expensive hormone test. We've used saliva as a way to suppress the hormone test, or to like average out what are your fat-based hormones in your saliva. We've done some other things that also are a little better at approximating those fat-based hormones. But the truth is, they're really difficult to measure. If there's one test that I do to say, I wonder what your fat-based hormones are, I'll check their vitamin D. So when Betsy showed up, I said, you know, have you ever struggled with vitamin D? She goes, oh, it's terrible. It's in like the low 20s, which it should be 50 or above when it's healthy. So not only did I have that she's fearful of fat, and that's normal, but to get her past this was going to be an education to say, I need your hormones of fat restored. So this past week, she headed to the doctor to get these tests done. And she's like, my cortisol was low. You know, cortisol was chronically high, but it was not as high as it should be for the stress she was under. Her estrogen and progesterone numbers were both low. All of her fat-based hormones came back with the signal that, yep, we are in low supply. And I would contend you could have told me that. You could have got that from her history. She had a history of just running out of energy, really having that foggy brain that happens in a lot of folks when they've been low fat for a long time. And then you look at her vitamin D, and sure enough, it was low. Checking her ketones when she's, you know, fasted for 24 to 48 hours, you would think that they were like mine were this past week, but they were 0.3, 0.5, 0.6, you know, just barely saying that she's in ketosis. And so her ability to make ketones is equivalent to her ability to produce abundant amounts of fat-based hormones. So the parallel that you can grasp when you have ketone measurements and then these super expensive fat-based hormones that really do have evidence behind them. But I contend there's a better way to get there. And that is put them on a ketogenic diet, and you must teach them. This is so important. You must teach them that the fat that comes in their body is there to supply not just how to make ketones. So as she was taking the MCT C8 C10, I'm like, you should be taking 12 to 15 of those capsules a day. And there should be butter in your coffee. And you should be 3 meals a day right now. She's like, I haven't done 3 meals a day in maybe a decade, or I don't know, it's been years since she's done 3 meals a day. I'm like, what I'm looking for is to supply your body with fat, because the only fat your body can use is the C8-C10. That we've looked at this on other videos, where it's a very special fat that does not go through the absorption, it does not go through the digestion, it is absorbed. But that's kind of expensive, and you don't have to have C8-C10 to get this chemistry shift. It just makes it faster. You also need to do it long enough that you supply all of your hormones that are low on fat with the building blocks to make them. So it is why when we look at this keto continuum, we are looking for how well did we supply your mitochondria with ketones. And it's not something that you can gradually say, just by looking at you, I'm going to be able to tell you're overweight, so you need fat longer. That's not how it works. These two women were similar ages, and they have drastically different hormones in their background. Both of them I have instructed. Sheila was a few weeks ago, but had gone back to just eating high fat until she could feel the sense that she was full. And those fat-based hormones, I didn't list them all. There's cholecystokinin, there's peptide YY, there's leptin and ghrelin have their shifts that they're going to make. All of these fat-based hormones, you don't need to know the name of, you don't need to have a blood test for. You will be able to feel satiety, fullness, and energy. And that's when we can start marching through some of the more advanced levels of the keto process.
Please subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. Stay tuned.